whatever I am going to say is going to touch each and every one of you in your lives. The subject, I mean, unfortunately, this concerns each and every one of us, our loved ones, parents, sisters, brothers, uncles, aunts, grandparents, children. But let me first ask you a very personal question. How many of you here have had a loved one bedbound for a period of time and eventually dying? Please raise your hands. I see a few hands going up, and as I wait, I see slowly more and more hands about to go up. It's not a very comfortable thing to do, especially when you suspect that you may be asked to share some of those personal feelings. Pardon me. Those who have experienced that would feel some pain as I talk. But the others, please remember, it's a question of time. Unfortunately, it is good to be prepared. It's not a comfortable thing to think about, but it's good to be prepared, because when we are unprepared, it takes us unawares and really affects our lives a little too much. First, let me start with the story of Sangeeta. Sangeeta lived in an one-room hut with her single parent, her mother. She would not exist in any database. That plot belonged to the government by the roadside, a narrow strip of land. She had no ration card, no Aadhaar, nothing. Her mother, as a manual laborer, earned enough to put her through school, and at the age of 21, Sangeeta got an engineering diploma. But she could not get to work because unfortunately her mother became ill and became bedbound. She couldn't go out to work. She needed to look after the mother. They had no income, except what a cousin, himself a poor man, would give them out of his own family's earnings every day. But they could not spend that on food very often, because they would need to hire an auto rickshaw to take the mother to the hospital, do a lot of tests. Not quite sure what those tests eventually brought out. Sometimes a prescription, medicines. She would get the medicines, but then there would be no money left for food. She lived like that for 5 years before our team found her. Then we started looking after the mother. Our team would visit her in that hut once a week. And then a newspaper through us got to hear about it. The family was interviewed. A television channel went there. And her story was aired. And one day, the television personality, Parvati, rang up Sangeeta and said, people have sent in a bit of money. There is about 16,000 rupees. I'll bring it to you in a few days. Sangeeta said, a few days. I don't know if my mother will last that long. She is deteriorating very fast. So Parvati said, I'll come tomorrow. When Parvati went there were people crowding around the house. Anxious, Parvati pushed open that tiny door and went in. The mother was lying dead in the middle of the room, and above her, Sangeeta was hanging. Sangeeta has left a note saying, there is nothing more for me to live for. I am also going with mom. When Parvati told me the story, she had tears running down her cheeks. And I said, that must have been a tremendous shock for you. Not a shock, doctor, Parvati said. What I felt was a slap on my cheek. Sangeeta was asking me, where were you all these 6 years? Friends, that's a slap on the cheek of each one of us. Despite all the cultural heritage that we boast of, we are one of the most insensitive societies Look, when you are walking across the street, if your friend slips and falls, wouldn't you raise a hand? Wouldn't you help the person up? You are not a human being if you do not do that automatically. But as a society, we have learned to turn our backs, pretend that it doesn't exist. Our government does not have an effective socialized medicine. And we as a society are happy with that. We blame the government, but the government is us. Let's not forget that. We are allowing that thing to happen. Well, if you think this is a problem, the poor, wait a minute. All of us are at risk. Because everyone in this room will have some money in the pocket. So you are likely, when your loved one needs help, to end up in a good hospital. Great if you can get better and leave the hospital in 5 days. But if unfortunately your loved one does not have a curable disease and eventually the deterioration occurs, then, hey, wait a minute. When somebody dies, some changes have to occur in your body. And unfortunately, the World Health Organization's statistics still says that human mortality is 100%. All of us will die someday. And when that happens, your blood sodium concentration will fall, the oxygen concentration will fall, and when that change happens, every decision is taken out of your hands. Your loved one is wheeled into an intensive care unit. Every single organ in the body will be studied. The screens will show every single chemical and physical parameter. As a medical student then, and as medical students now, we are taught to have a very tubular vision. Be very careful not to look at the human being. Look at the disease. Cure the disease. If you can't cure, pretend that you are not there. You can take it home. There is nothing more we can do. When my time comes, I do not want to be like this, with a tube down the most sensitive part of my body into my throat, into my lungs, a machine breathing for me, an air-conditioned, solitary, rigorous imprisonment for life. My family can see me for 5 minutes in the evening. There is really no scientific basis for this incarceration. I don't want all those tubes around me so that even when they come in for 5 minutes, my family is afraid to touch my body. When my time comes, I believe this is my right. I want to be able to say a final farewell to my wife. I want to hang on to my son's hand and tell him, I love you very much. And it would be a great privilege if I can receive a kiss from my grandson and granddaughter on my cheek. Because I am a human being and not just a mass of cardiovascular system and respiratory system and sodium and potassium and those physical things. And we medical students are taught not to see people as human beings, but to see them as a mass of organs. We want, unless we think about it and act now, when we are having a disease, it's too late. You don't have a voice. Your family is weak. They don't have a voice. You can't fight for your rights to be a human being, to live like a human being in your last few days, and to die like a human being. I almost feel jealous of that person who is on her last day with a few drops of water going down her parched throat. That's a privilege that today happens only to poor people like Sangeeta's mother, not to our relatives. The Economist had this program, their economist intelligence unit, did a research involving 40 countries around the world. They assessed the quality of death using 24 different indicators, a scientific study. Among the 40, guess, ladies and gentlemen, where did India come? Bow your heads in shame. It came as the very last, next to Uganda, the 40th and last one on the list. Don't die. It's not safe to die in our country. This is what a man like Hinder said about the modern medicine. He said it about maybe some 30 or 35 years back. It is still valid. Things have not changed. We do not deserve a lot of credit for the way we treat people in the evening of their lives. And then look at the last part. The dissatisfied dead cannot noise abroad the injustice they have received. They have no voice. This man with cancer, when he came to us, had been in that position for about 3 weeks, most of 3 weeks. It took about 3 rupees worth of morphine and less than 1 hour to help him to get up and enjoy his first cup of tea in 3 weeks. This was possible. This is possible because in this state of Madhya Pradesh and UP and Rajasthan, we legally grow the plant poppy. Our government factories produce opium. We export it, shiploads of it to the whole world, and we are the world's largest suppliers of legal opium. And they get pain relief. And our own people in Madhya Pradesh is particularly bad, are denied of pain relief unless you go to the black market and then you don't know what you get. And we live in a country where parents kill their children because they can't see the child's pain. And a country in which last year, 2013, more than 26 people committed suicide because of suffering related to disease. It is about 29 years since the World Health Organization published something called the World Health Organization's 3-step ladder for pain relief. I am taking responsibility for what I am going to say. Even today, our medical students are not taught how to assess pain. You will find it hard to believe. The man on the street finds it hard to believe. But we are not taught how to assess pain and how to scientifically manage pain. Our doctors, 99% of them do not know it. But if you ask them, they don't even know that they don't know. This has not got into our medical curriculum, and medical curriculum in our country needs about half a century to be updated. And this is not attractive. This is not attractive enough for the healthcare industry which rules the world. Because most of the things there, including the morphine that we need in step 3, and which reaches less than 1% of the needy in our country, is inexpensive. If it is inexpensive, we don't want to have anything to do with it. The profit margin will not be good enough. If you do not use it, you can use medicines which are not effective, but which will be 100 times more expensive, and then the healthcare industry will be successful. Till the 1980s, I never heard the expression healthcare industry. We used to have healthcare service. Today, we have the healthcare industry. And many of you tomorrow may be managing that industry. And if, as managers, you make more profit out of human suffering, you are successful. We doctors look at diseases. That's only the surface. 9/10 of the human being's suffering is under the surface, and we are not taught to look for them or to correct them. I know for a fact that when I am ill, my suffering is not only the diagnosis, it's about all my physical symptoms, which may include pain or breathlessness or other suffering, but it's also the social issues, what happens within the family, and the financial destruction. Even in Kerala, our state is supposed to be more progressive in many ways, and our poor man is better off than in the rest of the country. But even in our state, 33% of all poverty in a recent study was shown to be because of treatment of diseases. And the anxiety, the fear, the depression, the guilt, all of which I will live with, these are all my problems. And the issues, why did my God desert me? What's the point of my being alive? I wish I were dead. All these are my problems. And we in palliative care have chosen not to turn our backs to the suffering and to look at it and see what we can do to improve the quality of life. For which we need to assess each and every one of these, for which some one person, not necessarily a doctor all the time, or very often better not a doctor, a social worker, a counselor, a nurse, sits with the person and listens to what he has to say. This is palliative care, which I believe is changing the face of medicine around the world. And remember, it is about 69 years since we have defined health not as just absence of disease, but as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. And finally, palliative care is making that happen, at least into some part in the beginning, as a beginning globally. And only last year, the World Health Assembly, which is the decision-making body of the World Health Organization, finally came out with a resolution which states that in all member states, health systems must integrate palliative care with all those qualifications into the continuum of care of all diseases, from the beginning to the end. And they must put in home-based care, not necessarily in the palaces that we build, but in the patient's home if he is too sick to come there. And palliative care is one branch that recognizes that when one person suffers, the whole family suffers. Those whose hands went up earlier with my question, can I ask you, would you agree with that? That when a person suffers from an agonizing disease, it's the whole family that suffers. And very often we choose to ignore that, but in palliative care, we choose to see the suffering in the family. And this man is no more, Shashi is no more, but his wife, she lives. She has never worked in her life. He was earning for the family. All of a sudden, she not only has to live with the grief of losing him, all the creditors come to her. She has to earn for the family, for her children. She has to look after her education. And she has to be turned into an entrepreneur all of a sudden. And we recognize that and help them in what way we can. And that care to the family includes children. We find that in those families with disease, often children drop out of school. And we raise the resources as non-government organizations. And this is happening not only where I work. In Kerala, there are more than 170 palliative care centers, mostly on the non-government sector, who have started doing all this as their own activity. And this has to be necessarily happen. This has to necessarily happen in hospitals also. And Kerala is one state where there is a palliative care policy since 2008. Last year, Maharashtra also has devised a policy, but the rest of the country has precious little government action on the matter. And we do this wherever we can find this place. This is a primary school. Our team goes there on every Saturday and does a outpatient clinic for the local population, but there are people who cannot even get there. The man on the other side of this hill cannot possibly get to a doctor unless we reach him. And when we do reach them, we recognize that it's the family who does most of the care, and we empower the family members to care for the person. And in this, we make use of the local population. When we healthcare professionals have chosen to go out into people's homes, the community has been very warm and welcoming, and we encourage them to form groups, local support groups. Many of them form their own non-government organizations just to make sure that this is sustainable. And we have shown that the community has the strength. There are enough people with goodness in their hearts to do it if only we show them the way. And I now am standing here as a marriage broker, proposing an arranged marriage between the healthcare profession and the management experts. What's happening today is that palliative care, including that World Health Assembly resolution, is changing the face of healthcare in a very small way. We need to make it to happen in a global way. Every person who needs care, not only treatment of the disease, but care, has to get access to care. For that, there are many healthcare professionals with a heart who want to do it, but we don't know how to go about effecting that change. We don't know how to balance the profit motive with the care aspect of it. And tomorrow, management systems designed to effect this change will change the face of healthcare to a more humane way in which people will be able to live with some dignity and die with some dignity. Best wishes to you. Thank you very much.